Hey guys, it's Kingdom Orange 2 here, and welcome back to my channel. Alright, so I was planning on making a things that don't make sense about the Tinkerbell movies video, but unfortunately there just wasn't enough things that would warrant an entire video. So instead, I have decided to rank the Tinkerbell movies and include some plot questions I had about each individual film, as well as give you some fun facts about the movies that I found on the internet. Now, before I go on, feel free to check me out on both my TikTok and Instagram pages. It's the same username for both, and I love meeting new people and connecting with all of you guys. So with that being said, let's fly right into it. So at the bottom of the list, number 7 is Tinkerbell and the Great Fairy Rescue. A lot of people seem to really hype this movie up, and I never really understood why that is. It basically follows Tinkerbell on the mainland for summer, where she ends up meeting this human girl named Lizzie, who has somewhat of a strained relationship with her father. Now overall, I did like the idea of the plot and finally getting some sort of human interaction with the fairies, but I found Lizzie to be kind of annoying. I don't know, I don't really remember what it was like to be a young kid, so I probably was just as annoying as she is at that age. However, I did really like that we got to see more of Tinkerbell's friends in this movie, especially since they rarely made an appearance in Tinkerbell and the Lost Treasure. But their mission to save Tinkerbell just didn't really interest me all that much. I do have one more stupid comment, and that is that I don't really understand why the fairies would need to remain on the mainland for the entire summer. Summer to me seems like it would be the easiest season to change because all of that heavy work would have been already done in the spring. But I don't know, maybe the writers just really didn't think too much about it. Number 6 is Tinkerbell and the Legend of the Never Beast. This was the first full-length movie where Tinkerbell wasn't really the main character, and instead we got Fawn, who they decided to redesign for some reason. I actually really love the new hair and outfit, but I find it to be a bit girly for Fawn, especially since she is the tomboy of the group. Now, I'm also guessing that they were planning on doing more movies for each of the girls in the future, but they did end up scrapping a 7th and 8th film, which I didn't actually find any details on them being about any of the other fairies, so nobody really knows. But anyways, the movie is centered around Fawn, who finds this beast she ends up calling Gruff and notices how he keeps building these mounds around Pixie Hollow. She spends most of the movie trying to hide Gruff from this fairy named Nyx, who is actually voiced by Mel B, a singer I'm absolutely in love with. But apparently, she only voices her in the British version of this movie. I have never, ever heard of a British version of a movie in my life, but that's a quick fun fact for you. Now, Nyx does warn Queen Clarion and Fawn about this Never Beast, who she believes is building towers to summon a lightning storm that will destroy Pixie Hollow. However, it turns out that he was creating the towers to protect Pixie Hollow. And honestly, I find this story to be kind of creepy and dark for a Tinkerbell movie. The green lightning in the Beast prophecy was giving me weird Antichrist vibes, but maybe I'm reading way too far into it. I also loved how this movie had somewhat of a sad ending to it. It's really rare to see in most Disney movies, but I feel like it worked out and was kind of needed. Number 5 is Tinkerbell and the Lost Treasure. So honestly, I remember this film being really terrible, and rewatching it, I realized it wasn't quite as bad as I remembered. The story basically follows Tinkerbell being tasked with creating a scepter for a moonstone, but a fight between her and Terrence causes her to break the stone, and Tinkerbell ends up going on a quest to figure out how to fix it. And one main complaint I have with this movie is I felt like the quest was kind of boring and uneventful. She meets this firefly named Blaze and encounters some trolls, but honestly, I didn't care for any of those scenes. I think they either should have come up with a more interesting and dangerous quest, or made the quest a longer part of the film. And the other thing that bothered me about this movie was the lack of the other Disney fairies in it. I know this is a Tinkerbell movie and they wanted to focus on her relationship with Terrence, but honestly I wish maybe she went with all of her friends on this quest, or maybe that storytelling fairy named Lyria or whatever her name was. Number 4 is Pixie Hollow Games. Now I know it seems weird that this TV special is so high on the list, especially since it's not technically a Tinkerbell film, but I felt like this was truly the first quote-unquote movie that was able to maintain most of my attention. Quick fun fact, I actually remember reading about this a while ago, But the Pixie Hollow Games was originally going to be the 5th movie in the Tinkerbell franchise after Secret of the Wings, and was titled Tinkerbell Race Through the Seasons, but I guess they decided to change the title and turn it into a shorter TV special. I couldn't find any other information about this, but I thought it was interesting to let everyone know. So in this TV special, we have this fairy version of the Olympics called the Pixie Hollow Games, in which all of the talents compete, and this year Rosetta is forced to participate alongside this other garden fairy named Chloe, who seems to have no problem constantly being covered in mud. Now, I did find it kind of annoying how difficult Rosetta was being during the games, but I'm happy that she decided at the end to suck it up and help her teammate. I also really loved how creative the writers were with the games. My favorite happened to be the one in which they all raced in giant teacups. Now, do I personally believe this special would have been boring if it was an entire movie? Probably, but I'm glad they decided to at least keep the same basic idea. Number 3 is Tinkerbell. So this is the first movie that was released based on Tinkerbell and serves as sort of an origin story. The film is basically about Tinkerbell and her struggle to accept who she really is. When she finds out Tinker Fairies can't go to the mainland, she tries to do a bunch of other talents, which ends up creating a huge disaster. But honestly, I felt like the scenes where she was trying to do other talents were some of the best in not only this film, but in the entire franchise. Now, one thing that always kind of bothered me about this film was that it never really tied into the rest of Neverland. There were no mermaids, pirates, or even Peter Pan. And I found out the reasoning behind this was the original Tinkerbell movie was actually scrapped and had to be completely reworked. This is something I'm going to touch on more in a future video, but for now, just know that Peter Pan was actually going to appear in this movie. I also wonder if they were ever going to touch on how she went from sweet to so temperamental, but maybe that's something they completely wanted to gloss over because they wanted their main protagonist to be super likable to kids. Number 2 is The Pirate Fairy. This movie is about a fairy named Zarina, who I initially thought was kind of annoying because she reminded me of the not like other girls trope. But anyways, she likes to experiment with pixie dust, but one day she experiments a little too far and ends up getting stripped of her talent by Fairy Gary. However, a year later, she comes back to steal this blue pixie dust during the Four Seasons Festival, and Tinkerbell and her friends attempt to take it back from her. But in the commotion of all of this, Zarina throws some experimented pixie dust at them, which causes all of the girls' talents to be swapped. Now honestly, I really love the idea of all of their talents being changed. It was almost like a fan fiction dream come true, and the talents they chose to swap were just genius. Like, seeing Rosetta as an animal fairy could have honestly made a plot for an entire film. I did also like how this movie was a backstory for Captain Hook, even though I don't really care for pirates, and I felt like some of the pirate scenes were a bit boring to me. I'm also kind of curious as to why Smee only appeared in a cameo in this movie, but maybe they didn't want to blur the fiction together so much. Your guess is probably as good as mine is. Finally, at number 1, we have Secret of the Wings. I absolutely adore this movie with all my heart, and so that's why it was super easy to place it at spot number 1. And for a quick recap, Tinkerbell ends up going into the Forbidden Winter Woods to figure out why her wings suddenly started to sparkle, and she ends up finding out that she has a fraternal twin sister named Periwinkle, and the movie basically focuses on the girls trying to figure out how to spend time together because warm fairies can't go into the winter because their wings will freeze, and the cold fairies can't go into the warm weather because their wings will not work or something, I don't know. One thing that people always like to point out was the plot hole that cold weather fairies have to stay in the winter woods, especially since in the first movie we see them in the warm seasons. But that didn't really bother me because I felt like we didn't see enough of them in the first movie for this to be super annoying, but I get why some people are kind of like picky about it. I'll also say that this movie had one of the best climax scenes, even though I'm not really sure that frost actually protects things. I mean, I know if you put food in the freezer, it will stay fresh for longer, so maybe that was the idea they were going for, or maybe I'm just really dumb. Regardless, I did think it was super bold for the writers to give Tinkerbell a sister, but I always wondered as to why after this movie we never saw her again. I don't know, maybe they just didn't want to ruin the dynamic between the 6 main friends, but these movies always have a bad habit of introducing important characters that are never really seen again. Alright, well, those were my rankings for all of the Tinkerbell movies. Make sure you guys tell me down below what your opinions are or how you would have ranked them. Also, I think it's really a shame that the franchise was canceled so abruptly, but I'm glad that Pixie Hollow still exists in the Disney parks, like at Disneyland, and will also be incorporated into Tokyo Disney Sea in 2024. If you liked this video today and want to see more content in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will see you soon. Bye!